Hello there, Ivy Barrow here with my second podcast. This one is looking at human rights legislation and the UK monarchy and its rules. So by way of an introduction, I'm just going to give you a context of what I am going to discuss, what I'm trying to lay out on the table, if you like, which will then go through some examples of law that has been quoted when it suits for certain people in the royal family, and other times complete silence. I will then go into some of the antics of the monarchy and its pals in the media, and the treatment of Harry and Meghan around the world, not just in the UK, and then come to some conclusions that I have formed with my non-legal background, as a caveat for any of the haters out there who are going to come forward and say the law says this and that. Whatever. My approach to this is that what is going on is not right. There are many things that I think breach the law, and who knows, they may come up in certain proceedings in the future. I have no idea. But I'm just merely going through, as human rights legislation stands, an overview of it, and monarchy and its protocols and rules. So, the background, an introduction to it. Oh, and by the way, there is an accompanying article with this. It is quite long. I've submitted it already. I suspect it may be in a number of linked parts, but either way, it's on the same topic, and obviously in more detail. But this podcast gives you a flavour of what's to come, and maybe in the future you will want to revisit both in order to get a feel of where I'm coming from, and also to form your own opinions. So, here we go. Introduction. Have you ever wondered whether the British royal family and their associates in the British media, particularly those in the Royal Rota, live in an alternative universe compared to the rest of us? Are there different forces operating in their zone? Does the UK monarchy use a different rule book when it comes to interaction with the Sussexes, as opposed to every other family member? Is slavery still alive and thriving in the UK monarchy? Is the chasing of Harry and Meghan around the world for breaking of fake rules and or protocol part of a new reality show that we've not been informed about? Is the mission to break them psychologically part of a new game show of endurance? And if so, who is behind the concept? And which TV network is financing it all? When does this new game show come to an end? When is the last episode? Is this a nod to the Matrix? Except in this case, there is no rule of law. Just permission to chase two people who dared to have independent thought and wanted to live outside the location that has been designated for them. Is this a new game show based on a group who are enslaved and told that they are fortunate because of all the luxuries they can enjoy, but the downside is that they have no rights? Abuse is regarded as character building for royal life, based on standards which enshrine preservation of the institution. Anyone who dares to question this abusive, oppressive society is pounced upon with the aim to break their spirit, and to then rebuild them in the clone-like stature of the other members. If that is not acceptable to any objectors, they are treated like slaves gone bad, and they are treated like prey, hunted down around the globe until they break or their heart stops beating. Now, Back in the real world, where laws do exist, this alternate universe is not recognised or known about. Most people do not see the red flags about what is happening. All they see are two wealthy people shirking their responsibilities. Those of us with sight and, more importantly, vision, recognise what is happening here, and it is a very dangerous game that is being played out in front of our eyes. All the key groups who are acting as oppressors are those who benefit from the current setup. More importantly, if groups or individuals outside of that protected cluster did half of what has been going on for centuries in that protected bubble, it would be considered against the law, national or international. This podcast is a foray into basic human rights legislation and how it is used when it suits certain people within that protected cluster, but how it equally is ignored when it comes to fake outrage about whatever Harry and Meghan are doing on any given day. Most of the time, things have not been done or said or meant in the way the outrage is reported. But as squad members know, truth is not a necessary element in this game, just like there are no established rules. I am by no means a legal expert, so before any of the haters start to moan about this and that, we know they haunt our pages. This podcast is based on my perceptions and my thoughts of how the same legislation is used for some people in the royal family, but totally ignored when it comes to Harry and Meghan. These are my perceptions of how certain groups have been given permission, direct or implied, to operate outside of established procedures in the pursuit of two people who are now treated like modern-day runaway slaves. UK Monarchy and its partners in the media are acting like an ex-partner who can't believe the other half has left them, and in doing so is publicly using abusive methods to gain sympathy for those with limited clarity on what is happening in front of them, in the hope that the couple will break and return. I say couple, the aim is clearly for Harry to leave his wife and son and return to the royal family and be the acceptable face of the UK monarchy until the Cambridge children are adults. And then Harry would be part of the people in the firm who serve no purpose and who are shoved into the background and form part of the royal wallpaper pattern. Like I said earlier, if this occurred in any other family setting, legal groups would be concerned for the people within the framework, particularly the children born into that framework who are high in the line of succession. Children created to serve the monarchy. Children born without rights. Children who are born first are considered valuable. Others are born to support the firstborn. Children who are not allowed independent thought. Children who are not allowed to fulfill their potential and who must at all times devalue themselves in order to make the firstborn look good. In any other walk of life, treatment of children along those lines would be considered anything but positive, and on several fronts is a breach of human rights. So this podcast will be a preamble around human rights legislation both international and local. I hope that at the end of this piece, increasing numbers of people begin to question what is going on here. I will refer to a few elements of the legislation, but I have also included sections which I hope give food for thought, which will lead people to question other implications. There are charts going to be included, there are charts in the articles accompanying this as well, and I'm hoping that people sit down and go through some of those. I know it can appear to be a very dry subject, but actually, even if you just look at the broad headlines, it's quite clear, I believe, where things have been parked and ignored in terms of Harry and Meghan, but brought out when it's for the favoured ones. And just looking at those headlines alone, those main bullet points, you can see stark differences in treatment. That cannot be right. I hope that appears in future legal arguments, whatever case, because I'm sure there'll be more than one over the years. But it's not right. It certainly isn't acceptable that people are brought into this world with a role to play that they had no say in, and their treatment when they have any kind of questions or thoughts against that approach is far from good. So let's see how we get on. So let's look at the context of human rights legislation. Just a few bullet points. There'll be far more in the charts for you to read in more detail, but just an overview in terms of what I'm going to say in the podcast. So, key points. What are human rights? Human rights are standards that allow all people to live with dignity, freedom, equality, justice, and peace. Guaranteed to everyone without distinction of any kind, such as race, colour, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. Human rights are part of international law, contained in treaties and declarations that spell out specific rights that countries are required to uphold. Some countries incorporate human rights in their own national, state and local laws. Why are human rights important? Human rights reflect the minimum standards necessary for people to live with dignity. Human rights give people the freedom to choose how they live, how they express themselves, and what kind of government they want to support. Human rights are important by guaranteeing life, liberty, equality, and security. Human rights protects people against abuse by those who are more powerful. There is a section within the legislation that refers to human rights and the characteristics of it. I'm not going to go through all of those here, but just to say, human rights belong to all people. Human rights cannot be taken away. Human rights are dependent on one another. Human rights cannot be treated in isolation, and human rights should be respected without prejudice. If you were wondering where the human rights legislation movement as a whole came from and the framework for it, you will see in the articles and you will see in the charts that will appear on the screen as I'm speaking, you have the International Bill of Human Rights. From that comes the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and from that there are two sections. One, International Covenant of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and 2. International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. There are quite a few bullet points and therefore narrative around the International Bill of Rights, which I quoted at the beginning, but I will just give a few examples, and on the chart you will see I've indicated some of the ones that I think apply particularly at the moment to the treatment of Harry and Meghan. And when you come to look at the articles, or articles they produce the whole thing in the first go, you will see there are a number of others that link to it, but for sake of time, I'm not going to go through all those. I'm just going to mention the bullet points and leave that phrase there for you to think about. So, looking at the International Bill of Rights, first bullet point I will mention, the right to equality and freedom from discrimination. The right to privacy. Freedom of opinion. The right to work. The right to food and housing. The right to health. Just as a starter. Now, in terms of who is responsible for upholding human rights, the phrase that is used, the legal statement is, under human rights treaties, governments have the primary responsibility for protecting and promoting human rights. However, governments are not solely responsible for human rights. It then states, every individual and every organ of society shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms, and by progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universe and effective recognition and observance. The provision means that not only the government, but also businesses, civil society, and individuals are responsible for promotion and respecting human rights. When a government ratifies a human rights treaty, it assumes legal obligation to respect, protect, and fulfil the rights contained in the treaty. Now, this is where I think things, for me, in doing the research, got really interesting. Because when you look at UK Monarchy and its protocols, which, by the way, most of them are not written down, and the ones that are written down are so archaic and go back so far. As I said, people are very selective in which ones they want to quote. And either way, protocols aren't law. And when I compared sort of UK monarchy and the apparent rules that Harry and Meghan break constantly when they do their fake outrage articles and have their mouthpieces go on TV in various programmes on certain networks in particular more than others, when you look at it and look at the law, the two are not the same. The two halves are not the same. There is a chart that will appear on the screen which looks at the various articles that are contained in the Human Rights Act. And just a reminder to everyone that Article 8 is the one that Prince William's legal team used to shut down any discussion, any articles, any mention of special friendships outside of his official family was used. And if you remember, within hours those things were taken down, even for people that were not part of the Royal Rota, but had certainly were journalists and had quoted and said they knew various things, they had heard of various things, and words to that effect, and those posts had been sitting there for the world to see for quite a long time, but within hours they were removed when Article 8 was quoted. So just so you know, there are a number of articles, and Article 8 is the right to respect for private and family life, home and correspondence. Now, why that would apply to just one person in the royal family, but in no shape or form does it appear to be applicable to the Sussexes. So, Article 8, a private and family life. Nobody should be able to secretly watch what you are doing without good reason, and we have the right to enjoy family life in the way we choose. The right to a family life protects your dignity and autonomy, your right to be independent and make your own decisions about your life. Funny that. Immediately I see those two things not applying to Harry and Meghan, at least not according to British media. The right to personal autonomy and physical and psychological integrity. This right means you must not be physically or psychologically interfered with. Again, that's obviously ignored where Harry and Meghan are concerned. Respect for your private and confidential information, including the storing and sharing of data about you. The right to control the spreading of information about your private life, including photographs taken covertly. As I said, Article 8 is the section of the human rights legislation that was used in the communications from Prince William's legal team to UK media and whoever else was writing about it at the time. And all action ceased, and even comments made, as I said, by other reporters outside of the Rota on social media was removed. My question is, why this international piece of legislation, which is in force, with some amendments to ensure that it suits the UK legal framework, does not appear to be applied to Harry and Meghan? Whether it should come into play as Prince Harry is a UK citizen, or whether it is applicable in the USA, as this is now the home of the Sussexes, I have no idea. I am not a legal expert at all. I am merely inquisitive as to why UK media are using the same piece of legislation in different ways for two members of the royal family, i.e., one is allowed to use it to stop articles and discussions about his private life, but the other is chased around the world and written about daily with no regard to the law in existence. Remember, it is international law as well as locally based. Regardless of titles, Prince Harry and his family are no less deserving of protection under the law than anyone else. If examined closer, as I have been doing in recent weeks, there are many aspects of the law on human rights that members of the royal family are not allowed to do, according to media mouthpieces with the authority of the royal family. The reality is that it is not illegal for them to do so, but more protocol, some written down, others not so, about what is deemed right for the members of the UK monarchy to allow themselves to be embroiled in, for example, politics. Most people know that the royal family do indeed involve themselves in politics, frequently, and just because they are not seen visiting or speaking with politicians in front of cameras, it goes on. Senior civil servants from the government and royal palaces have a revolving door arrangement, so it is beyond naive to state that it does not happen, and it is inequitable to publicly chastise the Sussexes via a torrent of clickbait articles in tabloid publications suggesting to their readers that interference in politics took place in the USA presidential voting process. I would suggest that there is likely to be a far higher percentage of political activity going on behind the scenes with various members of the British royal family and politicians around the world, as well as within the UK itself. It is just done out of sight most of the time. It is not illegal for members of the royal family to vote in elections. It is just something that the Queen has decided is not appropriate for them to be involved in. In my mind, in the future, when all USA documentation is finalised, there is no reason whatsoever that Prince Harry could not vote in an American election process, irrespective of whether or not the UK royal family and their associates in the media are unhappy about that prospect. The only member of the UK monarchy who is above the law is the Queen. Anyone else in the royal family who may have transgressed can be charged. For example, Princess Anne, I recall, was charged for a speeding offence many years ago, driving at 90 plus miles per hour in a 70 miles per hour zone. But none of the family can be arrested in the presence of the Queen, or questioned on the grounds of or near to any royal palaces. Think about that when it comes to a certain person. They can't be touched on royal premises, they can't be questioned on or near royal premises, and they cannot be arrested in the presence of the Queen. Make of that what you will. Family life. In the legislation it refers to family life and privacy. There is no set description for what constitutes a family. This element is usually applied in cases where children are removed from the family home for whatever reason. Again, without going into detail, it has been suggested that the Queen has the rights over all of the grandchildren in that family. One does wonder about that, but I don't think we'll be seeing the Sussex's child or children in the future, if they come along, on UK soil for a very long time. Respect for your home is another phrase. You have a right not to have your home interfered with, such as by surveillance or unlawful entry or evictions which have not followed due process. There should be respect for your correspondence. You have the right to uninterrupted and uncensored communications with others, a right that is particularly relevant when challenging phone tapping and the reading of your private communications. Again, I'm not going to elaborate on that because of legal proceedings, but you can see where I'm coming from with that. It is time for sensible people of the UK to cease thinking of members of the royal family as people that you own based on the tax you pay towards their existence. There are questions to be asked about whether a modern society needs and should pay for a monarchy. There are questions to be asked about how many in the family line should be funded by the UK taxpayer. Is it right in this day and age to have children brought into the world to be used as chattels and have a life mapped out for them from birth to grave? Is it right that the firstborn child of a senior royal is considered a future king or queen, regardless of whether they wish to take on that role, and more importantly, have the competence to do it? Are we saying that modern-day slavery within royal circles is acceptable? Children are prevented from reaching their full potential. Children are used as objects, not human beings. Children have no rights within royal circles, but they do if born outside of it. Treatment of children in this way would be considered to be abusive outside of royal confines. Prince Harry and Meghan have been treated like pariahs because they dared to do the following things. They want to work for a living. They did not want to be a third wheel for his older brother and wife merely because he was born second. Royal family and their media associates in the Royal Rota have tried to make it difficult for the Sussexes to leave by quoting all manner of restrictive reasons why it was not a good idea. That did not work, as we know. The royal family have attempted to punish Prince Harry for marrying someone who was not from the gene pool usually fished in for spouses, in order to continue the parasitic way of living off the UK public. The royal family have spent the last 4 years on a bullying and harassment campaign against the newest member of the royal family, who also is a person of colour. I won't say any more about that due to litigation that is ongoing, but needless to say, that campaign backfired too, and the couple left the UK, as we know. UK media professionals constantly and openly used phrases that ordered Meghan to go back to her own country. Prior to that, there was talk of shipping her and Harry off to Africa, as if the whole continent of Africa could be used by the British royal family as some kind of dumping ground, punishment place for those who did not abide by royal family rules. Rules that they were born into and had no say in composition. Rules that morphed into various permutations dependent upon the anger that the British media wanted to pretend existed on any given day. Recently, 1QC wrote on one of the popular social media platforms about the undertones of racism written by Royal Rota reporters. The QC referred to the implications for people of colour in the UK if someone like Meghan could be treated this way. What hope for ordinary people? Like clockwork, one of the reporters from the Rota, who regularly posts negative comments about Meghan and implies that Harry is a weak and easily led man, etc., etc., responded to the QC, admitting that there were indeed undertones of racism in the reporting, but that the QC should know that undertones is not against the law. Now, let that sink in for a moment. We have always known that this has existed from the start 4 years ago, and we were gaslighted every time. Now that same pack feel confident and secure enough to admit they choose their wording carefully, but it is indeed racism that is the main theme here. If you remember, in my last podcast, one of the royal photographers made a short video a few weeks ago pretending to show sorrow about how things had turned out and was begging Harry to return to help out the Cambridges. He even admitted that the reason for all the disgusting press coverage was because Meghan would not meet with them and agree to allow them to profit off the Sussexes and their son. He said through fake emotional distress that if Meghan had allowed access, the press could have seen her as human, as opposed to what? And she could have seen them as human too, blah blah blah. Less than 2 months later, that same photographer had an article in one of the tabloids this month, now stating that the Sussexes, and I quote, deserve all the abuse, close quotes, that they are receiving. I stated in all of my articles since March 2020 that the treatment of the Sussexes, commencing with Meghan since 2016, has been abusive, which has become worse over time, and the dangers to the Sussexes family have increased because of the behaviour of the royal family and their partners in the abuse in the British media. All of the activity against the Sussexes is in breach of human rights legislation. None of what the Sussexes have done in leaving an abusive environment is against UK or international law. Prince Harry will always remain a prince of a future king, and nothing can change that. All this talk of removing various titles is meant to cause emotional harm. Some have been removed and others may be in the future. Removing the dukedom would require an act of Parliament. Good luck to them with that. If that is yet another desperate route that the British royal family and media friends wish to see happen, for one, it requires legislation to remove something from someone who has not broken any laws and has not in fact done anything wrong. Secondly, it will open the door for automatic removal of other statuses of other members of the royal family. And thirdly, this will not be a good look for the UK to the rest of the world. It will be based on vindictiveness and malice, merely because a couple expressed their right to walk away from abuse. I have a concern about children born into that type of regime, that no amount of wealth can heal or even pretend to look better than what is actually happening. Any other family doing what the royals do to and with their children would have child services on their doorstep. Child slavery, then, turns into slavery of adults. And this belief by some media pundits that they have rights to what happens inside a woman's womb and who should be there to see the action, etc. It is grotesque. And for other matters relating to children stretching far back in royal history, one would have thought there is much that the royal family and the media could and should be focused upon. If the royal family cannot function without two people and their child who they chased away because of their abuse towards them, then it speaks volumes about the work ethic and popularity and income generation of all the others. I am of the firm opinion, as a non-legal person, that this treatment of the Sussexes is in breach on multiple aspects of articles of basic human rights legislation. Royal protocol is not the law, and protocol stated in respect of the Sussexes is not written down anywhere, just something expected should happen in respect of the Sussexes only. Article 8 was quickly pulled out of the magician hat for one prince on an alleged rumour. Harry and Meghan could build furniture with volumes of actual incidents of actions in breach of the law on multiple articles, including Article 8. My caveat being, I am a non-legal person, but I stand by my opinion. All of these actions against Harry is pushing him further away from his blood relatives, not bringing him closer. No one rushes to return to their abuser. Litigation could take place at any time on so many fronts, and may well do so in the future. I think the royal family should just get on with the cards that they dealt themselves, and be glad that the monarchy is still hanging on by a thread. I personally, if given the opportunity to remove the structure of the monarchy, would vote to do so. The behaviour of people who Harry should have been able to rely on to welcome and protect his wife and son have been behind the abuse. I have gone from not caring about what members of this family did from day to day to now wishing for the monarchy to end, based on their behaviour towards Harry and Meghan and their son, over the last 4 years. Their actions have ensured that people like myself, who did not really care about them, have now become very interested in seeing the whole thing come to an end. The actions of the royal family have now ensured that their biggest income generator, and with the admirable skill set that they have and experience between them, caused the Sussexes to walk away. And now their rise to global icons has already happened because of the disgusting treatment by the monarchy and its media. All the protesting and gutter behaviour about Sussexes leaving the UK, and now already living a better quality of life, and safer and protected more so than in the UK, is being done by people who were better off with the Sussexes staying within the fold. All those protesting are worried that the royal family cannot survive, or will at best be severely low on popularity and income generation in its current form, which means less income generation for the tabloids and TV talk shows, which have nothing to offer to compete in any meaningful way with the growing number of streaming services and online news networks. I call it karma. The legislation is there. The abusers want to hope that the Sussexes never feel the need to use it in future legal challenges. Personally, I hope that they do. And that's the end of my sort of little foray into human rights legislation and the UK monarchy and its framework, or should I say vague framework of protocol. In some cases, in many cases in fact, does not exist, it's not written down, it's not a rule, and even if it's a rule, it's not the law. And there are so many other things one would believe that the royal family would want to spend time exploring and tidying up and sorting out, instead of giving sanction to chase 2 people because they dared to leave the abuse. They've left. They have resided in 2 different countries. The abuse was still directed their way. But they are now in a much stronger position. They don't owe the royal family anything. They've got income coming in. They can live a life. They are protected. I, for one, hope they never, ever return to the UK to live. I don't think the UK deserves them. I don't feel that the Sussexes would be safe if they returned. And to be quite honest, they're only being asked to return to prop up others and to keep the tabloid industry going. I have no qualms about both of those factions going to the wall. I really don't, because I am confident that Harry and Meghan are forces for change, will help so many people on a global scale now, and there really is no need for them to be in an abusive environment because Harry was born second. And that's really the bottom line. He is capable of far more, he deserves far more. The fact that Meghan is still standing and breathing and has a heartbeat of any description is a sheer miracle. And as for their son, the fact that he arrived in the world is beyond a miracle. And for those reasons alone, I hope they never, ever set foot with the intent of living in the UK or spending any more hours than they need to on UK soil. And the UK monarchy and its friends in the tabloid press can do whatever they need to do to survive. And if they don't survive, well, what a shame. Not. And that's the end of my second podcast. I hope it wasn't too boring because it's around legislation and the framework. I hope that you read more about this subject because it is actually interesting when you sort of delve through a lot of the dry, boring sort of on first sight impressions. But particularly when it comes to our couple, they have put up with an awful lot, and they are still standing, and very few people would be. And I do believe if they came back to live in the UK, their chances of remaining standing would be reduced by the day. I just don't feel that they're safe here. I'm not saying anywhere is safe, but I think the UK is the most risky place for them to be. So, I hope you enjoyed that little journey around the legal framework in terms of human rights. I hope that you spend time looking at some of the charts and other charts. I've made a list of all the references that I used to come put all these things together, and that'll be in the articles that will be published soon. I highly recommend that you read some or all of those, not from cover to cover, but you look up certain things, because it is very interesting when you see what the law says, even with a UK watered down version on some things, and equally the same for USA. But there is enough there that make you seriously question why this is being allowed. Hopefully it's evidence for certain activities in the future. We'll see. But bye for now. Hope you enjoy the articles, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Bye for now. Bye.